It was a normal morning at the school. The sun had barely reached the windows of the large hall, but students were already filing in, chattering and laughing in small groups. The smell of polished floors mixed with the faint scent of chalk dust, and the hum of voices made the space feel alive. Teachers walked between the rows of benches, checking that everything was in order. The principal stood near the stage, adjusting papers and greeting students with a smile that seemed friendly enough. But there was a quiet energy in the air that made some students uneasy. Among the students, there was one boy who moved a little differently from the others. He walked with a careful, measured pace, not rushing, not trying to draw attention. His backpack was worn, his shoes slightly scuffed, and his eyes always seemed to be observing more than participating. He liked quiet corners, sitting in the back when possible, but he had a secret that almost no one knew. Music had always been a part of his life. Not loud music that drew attention, but quiet, private melodies that lived in his mind. He would often hum to himself in the hallways or tap rhythms on his desk during class. And when he was alone at home, he would spend hours at the small piano his parents had saved for, fingers dancing over the keys with a grace and skill that amazed anyone who heard it. But here, in this crowded hall filled with hundreds of students, that music was invisible. He kept it hidden. Most people never saw it, and he liked it that way. To him, music was personal, a place where the world's judgment didn't exist. The principal, however, had noticed the boy before, not because of his music, but because he was quiet, polite, and always a little apart. The principal liked to make jokes, and sometimes those jokes were harmless, but other times they carried a sting that was harder to forget. That morning, he had decided to play one of those jokes, something that he thought would be funny for the students and maybe even for himself. He called the boy to the front of the hall, and a ripple of curiosity spread through the crowd. Students whispered to one another, some giggling quietly. "Why him?" one of them muttered. The boy froze for a moment, unsure whether he had heard correctly. The principal's voice rang clear. "Come on up here. We're going to have a little fun. Play the piano for us, just a short piece. Make it quick, nothing fancy." A hush fell over the hall as the boy walked toward the stage. He felt every eye on him. Some faces looked curious, some skeptical, some already smirking in anticipation of what they assumed would be a mess. The principal chuckled softly, clearly expecting the boy to fumble. "Don't worry," he said, leaning slightly toward the audience. "We just want a little entertainment. Let's see what he's got." The boy's hands shook slightly as he approached the piano. He had played in front of people before, but never like this. Never in front of an audience that was already expecting him to fail. His stomach twisted into knots. Every step felt heavy. He wanted to refuse, to run back to his seat, to hide. But there was a strange pull forward, an urge to face this moment. Maybe, deep down, he wanted someone to be surprised. The stage was higher than he expected, and he had to climb the steps carefully. The hall seemed to grow larger as he moved closer to the piano. He could hear the low hum of whispers behind him, the shifting of benches, the scraping of shoes. His fingers brushed the keys for the first time, and the coldness of the piano sent a shiver through him. He took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. The principal leaned back in his chair, arms crossed, a grin spreading across his face. "Go ahead, son. Show us what you've got." The boy closed his eyes for a brief moment. He imagined the quiet afternoons at home, the sun filtering through the curtains, the way the keys felt beneath his fingers. He could almost hear the melodies forming in his mind, soft and confident. And then, slowly, he began. The first notes were gentle, cautious, almost hesitant. They filled the hall softly, a delicate sound that made some students glance at each other in surprise. There was no chaos, no awkward fumbling, just music. And it was good, better than good. It was beautiful. At first, the students didn't know how to react. Some had been expecting a joke, a funny moment at the boy's expense. Others had been giggling quietly, ready to join in the mockery. But the music caught them off guard. It was clear that this was no ordinary performance. The hall seemed to shrink around them, and for a moment, the chatter stopped completely. The boy's fingers moved with confidence now, each note clear and intentional. He had become lost in the music, unaware of the principal's smirk beginning to falter, unaware of the wide eyes of his classmates. He didn't notice the principal leaning forward, curiosity replacing the amusement. He didn't notice some teachers exchanging looks, impressed despite themselves. As the piece continued, the whispers faded. The students leaned forward on their benches, captivated. Some mouths opened slightly in awe, some eyes glistened, and a few students even held their breath as if not wanting to break the magic. The boy's playing grew bolder, more expressive, each note carrying emotion that seemed to touch everyone in the room. The timid, quiet boy had disappeared, replaced by someone completely in command of his talent. The principal shifted uncomfortably in his chair. The joke he had planned was no longer funny. The laughter he expected had vanished, replaced by silence and admiration. He watched as the boy's hands flew over the keys, filling the hall with music that made even the most skeptical students stop and listen. Some students tried to whisper, "Is he really that good?" Others simply shook their heads, unable to believe what they were hearing. The boy's performance was no longer a prank. It had become a revelation. For the boy, it felt like a different world. He had stepped into the spotlight reluctantly, expecting embarrassment, and instead he found himself in a place where his gift could be seen and felt. He played not for the principal, not for the students, not even for recognition. He played because the music had always been inside him, waiting for a moment like this to emerge. When the last note lingered in the air, the hall was silent for a heartbeat longer than anyone expected. And then, slowly, applause began to build. One student clapped, then another. Then the entire hall joined in, cheering and whistling, filling the room with sound that was entirely different from the whispers and smirks from minutes ago. The principal stood frozen for a moment, caught between embarrassment and awe. He had meant for this to be a joke, a light-hearted moment at the boy's expense, and instead he had witnessed something extraordinary. The boy stood quietly at the piano, breathing heavily, a small, humble smile on his face. He looked around at the students, at the principal, at the teachers, and realized that something had shifted. The prank had backfired, yes, but in a way that no one could have predicted. Some students rushed forward, patting him on the back, offering congratulations, asking how he had learned to play like that. The boy nodded politely, saying very little, letting the music speak for him. The principal finally approached, clearing his throat, a mix of hesitation and respect in his voice. That was incredible, he admitted quietly. I didn't expect. His words trailed off as he gestured vaguely at the piano. The boy only smiled faintly, feeling a warmth inside that was new. For the first time in that school hall, he felt seen. Not for being quiet, not for blending in, not for anything else, just for who he was and what he could do. And in that moment, the boy understood something important. Life had a strange way of testing people, putting them in moments they didn't choose, forcing them into the spotlight when they least expected it. But sometimes, those moments could reveal the best parts of a person. Sometimes, a situation meant to embarrass or diminish could instead show the world exactly what a person was capable of. The principal, still watching him, seemed to realize this too. His smile had faded, replaced with something more honest, something that looked a little like respect. He had intended to make the boy a joke, but the joke had become a lesson, not just for him but for everyone in that hall. By the time the bell rang to end the assembly, the boy had returned to his seat. Students were still buzzing, talking excitedly about what had just happened. He listened quietly, a small smile playing on his lips, feeling a sense of calm he hadn't felt before. The music had done more than fill the hall. It had changed the way he saw himself. He didn't know what the future would hold, or whether anyone would remember his performance tomorrow, next week, or next year. But he did know this. For the first time, he had faced a moment meant to scare him, meant to shame him, and had turned it into something powerful, something beautiful, something that no one could take away. And as the students filed out of the hall, still talking and laughing, the boy sat quietly, his fingers brushing the edge of the piano, remembering the way the keys had felt under his hands, the way the sound had filled the room, and the way, for a brief moment, He had truly been seen. The moment the boy stepped away from the piano, the hall was still buzzing, but not with laughter anymore. The students were wide-eyed, some whispering to each other in disbelief, others openly clapping as if the applause could never be enough to show what they felt. The boy returned slowly to his seat, his hands brushing against the edges of the bench for balance. His heart was still racing, a mix of adrenaline, relief, and a quiet pride he had never allowed himself to feel in front of others before. Teachers walked past him, murmuring softly among themselves. Some shook their heads, smiling in amazement. Others whispered words of encouragement, glancing at the principal with expressions that said more than words could. The principal, however, was frozen in place. He had expected a moment of amusement, a little joke at the boy's expense, and instead, he had witnessed something that left him unsettled. He had not anticipated admiration, or the way the students had suddenly changed their tone, their expressions shifting from mockery to awe. The principal finally cleared his throat and stepped forward. His hands were slightly trembling, as if he were trying to steady himself against the shock of what had just occurred. "That was impressive," he said slowly, his voice quieter than usual. The words sounded awkward, as if he were trying to squeeze meaning from them, unsure if he deserved to praise the boy after the way he had set the scene. The students, noticing this, exchanged glances, a mix of satisfaction and curiosity flickering across their faces. Some of the older students began to whisper to each other, talking about the boy's talent in tones that sounded like respect rather than gossip. "I didn't know he could play like that," one said. "Neither did I," another replied. "He must have practiced forever without anyone noticing." The murmurs grew louder, spreading through the hall, and the boy could feel it, though he kept his gaze downward, not wanting to make a show of himself. The principal's plan had completely backfired. What was meant as a prank, a light-hearted joke at the boy's expense, had turned into a performance that stunned the school. The thought weighed on him, pressing against his pride. He had wanted to entertain the students by putting someone in a position of vulnerability, but instead, the boy had turned the moment into something far greater than he had imagined. The music had spoken for itself, and it had spoken truth. The boy had talent, skill, and a confidence that had surprised everyone, including himself. Teachers began to discuss quietly among themselves. One of them suggested that the boy should be invited to perform at school events, while another noted that such a talent could be nurtured for the future. "We should make sure he doesn't get overlooked," someone added, nodding thoughtfully. The boy overheard bits of the conversation, though he tried not to let it distract him. A small warmth spread through him, a feeling that maybe, just maybe, people were beginning to see him for who he truly was. Meanwhile, the students were buzzing with excitement. Groups clustered together, talking about the piece the boy had played, the way his fingers had moved over the keys, the emotion in the music that seemed to reach every corner of the hall. Some of the students who had been teasing him earlier now looked slightly embarrassed, realizing that their laughter had been misplaced. Others had a new respect, not just for the boy, but for the power of talent hidden in plain sight. The boy's classmates, who had never considered him anything more than quiet and reserved, now saw him differently. They noticed the way he carried himself, the subtle confidence that had emerged as he played. A few of them, inspired by what they had witnessed, decided to ask him questions about music, about how long he had been practicing, and what had motivated him to play so beautifully despite the unexpected pressure. The boy answered politely, though briefly, careful not to appear boastful. The experience was not about praise for him. It was about the music itself and the truth it carried. The principal, realizing that the moment had shifted far beyond a simple joke, began to reflect on his own actions. He had underestimated the boy, assuming that a quiet demeanor meant weakness or a lack of skill. He had thought that the students would laugh, that the moment would pass as a minor entertainment. Instead, he had been confronted with a reality that challenged his assumptions. Talent could be hidden, strength could be quiet, and humility did not equal insignificance. He felt a mixture of embarrassment and admiration, a rare combination that made him both thoughtful and introspective. Some students, still buzzing with excitement, approached the boy with a mix of curiosity and admiration. "How did you learn to play like that?" one asked. "Did anyone teach you?" another added. The boy shrugged slightly, giving a modest smile. "I just practiced a lot," he said softly. "It's something I love." There was no arrogance in his tone, no desire to show off. His words were simple, but they carried weight because they reflected truth. He loved music, and music had given him a voice in a place where he often felt unseen. As the day went on, the story of the boy's performance spread quickly through the school. Students who had missed the assembly asked questions. Teachers shared the story with colleagues, and even the principal found himself repeating the tale, though he could not quite recapture the laughter he had originally intended. The boy, meanwhile, returned to his routine, quietly sitting through classes, carrying himself with a newfound sense of confidence that did not go unnoticed. There was a quiet power in him now, a calm assurance that came from having faced a challenge and transformed it into something remarkable. In the following days, teachers and students alike began to treat the boy differently. There was a newfound respect, a recognition that he was more than quiet and reserved. He was talented, intelligent, and capable of surprising anyone who underestimated him. Invitations to participate in school events began to arrive, and some of the teachers encouraged him to take his music further, to explore opportunities that he might not have considered before. The boy listened politely, feeling a mix of excitement and nervousness. He had never sought attention, but the idea of sharing his gift with a wider audience was no longer intimidating. The principal, too, began to change his approach. He realized that moments of humor could be misjudged and that what might seem like a harmless prank could have unintended consequences. He approached the boy privately, offering a quiet apology for the way he had set up the situation. "I didn't expect that," he admitted. "You were incredible. I'm sorry for making you uncomfortable." The boy nodded, accepting the apology with grace. He did not need the recognition from the principal to know his worth. The music had already spoken for him. Other students began to take notice as well. Those who had previously ignored him or overlooked him in group activities now approached with curiosity, asking questions about his practice, the pieces he liked to play, and what inspired him. He answered with honesty, never exaggerating his abilities, never seeking attention, just sharing a part of himself that had always existed quietly. The interactions, though simple, helped him feel connected in ways he had not experienced before. Outside of school, the boy's performance became a topic of conversation in his neighborhood. Friends and neighbors praised him, impressed not only by his talent but by the courage it took to play in front of an entire hall when he had been unprepared and nervous. His family, too, felt a quiet pride, knowing that the boy had handled the situation with dignity and grace. The music had become a bridge between his private world and the outside, a way for others to glimpse the depth of his abilities without diminishing the part of him that preferred quiet. Despite the growing attention, the boy remained humble. He did not boast, he did not seek the spotlight, and he continued to move through his school days with the same quiet grace. But something had shifted within him. He now understood that talent, when met with courage and integrity, could turn even a moment of embarrassment into a moment of power. He had faced judgment, expectation, and a sense of mockery, and had emerged not only unbroken but celebrated. The realization filled him with a calm confidence, a quiet knowledge that he could handle whatever challenges came next. The principal, meanwhile, began to consider how he approached other students. He reflected on the assumptions he had made, realizing that quiet students often possess strengths that were invisible at first glance. He resolved to be more thoughtful, more careful, and more open to discovering the talents of those he might have overlooked in the past. The boy's performance had left an impression not only on the students but on the adults in the building, a reminder that assumptions could be misleading and that courage often came in quiet forms. By the end of the week, the hall where the incident had taken place felt different. Students who had witnessed the performance still spoke of it with excitement and respect. The story of the boy who had turned a prank into a moment of awe circulated among classes, inspiring others to share their talents without fear. The boy himself, while enjoying the recognition, remained grounded. He understood that talent was not about attention but about truth, about expressing what lived inside in the most authentic way possible. And so, life at the school continued, but something subtle had changed. Students were more willing to notice each other's abilities, teachers were more attentive to hidden potential, and the principal carried with him a lesson he would not forget. The boy had transformed not only his own experience but had reminded everyone that greatness could be found in the most unexpected places, and that courage often appeared when it was least expected. The boy continued to play his piano, sometimes in the quiet of his room, sometimes in small gatherings, always with the same honesty and dedication. Each time he remembered the day in the hall, the way the music had filled the space, and the moment he had realized that he could take a situation meant to embarrass him and turn it into something extraordinary. It was a lesson that stayed with him, a quiet reminder of the power of resilience, talent, and authenticity. After that unforgettable assembly, life at the school began to feel a little different for the boy. The music he had played was still the main topic of conversation among the students. Some had heard stories secondhand from friends, others had been there to witness it themselves, and all of them seemed to carry a sense of awe that lingered in the hallways and classrooms. What had started as a prank had transformed into something far greater, a display of skill and courage that left everyone thinking. The boy returned to his normal routine, quietly moving through his classes, but he felt a subtle change inside himself. There was no arrogance, no desire to show off. Instead, there was a quiet confidence, a calm understanding that he could face difficult moments and turn them into something meaningful. The applause and admiration from that day were not the reason for his change. It was the realization that his music had a voice, and that voice could speak even when words could not. Even the students who had once overlooked him began to see him differently. The whispers in the hallways, which had once been about how quiet or unusual he was, now included comments about his talent. Some students, who had previously teased him or ignored him, approached him with curiosity, asking about his piano, his practice, and the pieces he enjoyed. Their questions were not mocking, they were genuine, and the boy answered them with a simple honesty. He did not boast. He did not exaggerate. He spoke of music as he always had, with love and care, letting the words flow naturally. Teachers also took notice. They began to speak to him differently, inviting him to participate in events, encouraging him to practice more, and suggesting opportunities where his music could shine. One teacher quietly remarked to another that it was rare to see a student who possessed such natural talent combined with such humility. The principal, though still recovering from his initial misjudgment, began to think carefully about how he interacted with all students, realizing that there were often hidden strengths waiting to be discovered. The boy, however, remained grounded. While he enjoyed the recognition and opportunities, he continued to focus on the music itself. He practiced daily, often losing himself in the melodies, letting his fingers move freely over the keys, exploring emotions and stories through sound. Music had always been a private world for him, a place of comfort and expression, and it remained that way even as the world outside began to notice his talent. One afternoon, the principal invited him to perform for a small gathering of teachers and students, outside of the usual school assembly. The boy hesitated for a moment, remembering the prank and the pressure of performing in front of the large hall. But this was different. It was not a joke. It was an opportunity to share his gift on his own terms. He agreed quietly, walking toward the piano with careful steps, feeling a mixture of nerves and excitement. As he sat down and placed his fingers on the keys, the room grew silent. The students and teachers waited, not with judgment, but with anticipation. They had already seen a glimpse of his talent, and now they were ready to experience it more fully. He closed his eyes for a moment, drawing in a deep breath, feeling the familiar cold touch of the keys beneath his fingers. Then he began. The first notes were soft, almost hesitant, but they quickly gained strength and clarity. The boy's fingers moved with precision, each note deliberate, each chord carrying emotion. The room seemed to disappear around him. Students leaned forward in their seats, some closing their eyes to better feel the music. Teachers watched, captivated by the depth of feeling and the skill on display. The principal, sitting quietly at the back, felt a mix of awe and humility. He had intended to make a joke, and yet here was a moment of beauty that could not be planned or controlled. As the performance continued, the boy's confidence grew. His music became expressive, telling a story without words. The students listened, some in silence, some with small smiles, all clearly moved by what they were hearing. There was a sense of shared experience in the room, as if the music had created a space where everyone could feel the same emotion at the same time. It was powerful and it was real. When the last note lingered in the air, the room remained silent for a heartbeat. Then applause erupted, louder and more heartfelt than anything the boy had experienced before. Students jumped to their feet, teachers clapped with admiration, and even the principal smiled, feeling a mix of pride and wonder. The boy bowed slightly, a modest acknowledgement of the appreciation, but his eyes held a quiet satisfaction that went beyond applause. He had shared something meaningful, and it had been received with sincerity. After the performance, students approached him with questions and praise. "How do you make it sound so alive?" one asked. Another said, "I've never heard anything like that before." The boy smiled, simply replying that it was about practicing, listening, and feeling the music. He did not claim genius. He did not seek fame. He only shared what he loved. The principal, who had been observing quietly, finally spoke to him privately. "You have a gift," he said, his voice soft and sincere. "I'm sorry for how I treated you before. I didn't understand, and I should have known better. What you just did, it was incredible." The boy nodded, accepting the words with grace. He did not need the recognition to feel validated. The music had already proven its worth. News of the performance spread quickly through the school. Students who had missed it asked others to describe what had happened, and soon more people were talking about the boy and his talent. Teachers discussed ways to support him, encouraging him to consider joining music programs or competitions that could help him grow. Some students, inspired by his story, began to explore their own talents, realizing that hidden skills could be discovered and shared in unexpected ways. Despite the growing attention, the boy remained focused. He continued to practice quietly, sometimes in empty classrooms, sometimes at home, always seeking to improve, always seeking to explore new pieces and styles. Music had become more than a hobby or a secret. It had become a part of who he was. Yet, he never let the attention change him. He still walked quietly through the hallways, listened more than he spoke, and treated others with kindness and respect. The recognition was gratifying, but it was not the goal. The goal was the music itself and the joy it brought him. Over the following weeks, the principal and teachers began to notice changes in other students as well. Some who had been quiet or hesitant started to share their talents more openly, inspired by the boy's courage and skill. The school environment felt more supportive, more aware of the potential in each student. The boy's performance had not only showcased his talent but had also created a ripple effect, encouraging others to embrace their own abilities. One day, a music teacher approached the boy with a special request. The school was planning a community event, and they wanted him to perform as part of the program. The boy hesitated, unsure if he wanted to play in front of such a large audience outside the school walls. But the teacher assured him that it would be a supportive environment, a chance to share his gift with people who would truly appreciate it. After thinking quietly, he agreed, feeling a mixture of excitement and nervousness. As the day of the event approached, the boy practiced more than ever. He explored different pieces, refined his technique, and allowed himself to experiment with emotion and expression. He felt the same mix of nervousness and thrill he had experienced during the assembly, but this time he also felt a sense of readiness. He knew that he had prepared, that he could face the audience with confidence, and that the music he loved would guide him. When the day of the performance arrived, the community hall was filled with students, parents, teachers, and neighbors. The boy walked to the piano with careful steps, feeling the weight of the moment but also a quiet determination. As his fingers touched the keys, he closed his eyes for a moment, letting the familiar feeling of the piano calm him. Then he began to play. The music filled the hall, carrying emotion, precision, and beauty. People listened in awe, some moved to tears, some smiling in admiration. The boy's playing was confident, expressive, and deeply human, a reflection of the hours he had spent practicing and the emotions he had lived through. The applause that followed was thunderous, heartfelt, and unending. The boy bowed, not with arrogance, but with gratitude, feeling the connection between himself, the music, and the audience. That evening, as he walked home, he reflected on how far he had come. What had begun as a moment of embarrassment, a prank meant to embarrass him, had transformed into a journey of self-discovery, courage, and recognition. He had faced fear, embraced his talent, and shared it with the world. And in doing so, he had changed not only his own life but the lives of those who had witnessed his gift. He realized that sometimes, life presented challenges in unexpected ways, and those challenges could either break a person or reveal their true strength. He had chosen the latter, and as he practiced quietly in his room that night, the music flowing from his fingers felt freer, more alive, and more meaningful than ever before. After the community event, life at the school began to feel different for everyone. The boy's performance had left a mark that could not be ignored. Students walked a little taller, teachers spoke with more encouragement, and even the principal seemed more thoughtful than usual. The boy himself continued his quiet routines, but there was a subtle change inside him, a calm confidence that had grown steadily since the day of the assembly. He no longer feared being called to the front or judged for being different. The music had given him a sense of belonging that nothing else had before. Some students who had once overlooked him now sought his company, not just to hear him play, but to share ideas, interests, and sometimes even to learn from him. A few asked for music tips, hoping to improve their own skills, while others simply enjoyed listening to him practice during breaks. The boy answered politely, never showing irritation, never pretending he was more than he was. He remained humble, knowing that talent was not meant for pride, but for sharing and growth. Teachers began to notice more than just his talent. They noticed his focus, his discipline, and the way he quietly handled attention without arrogance. The principal, in particular, had begun reflecting deeply on his earlier actions. The prank that had started it all weighed on him differently now. He had intended to humiliate the boy, expecting laughter from the audience, but he had underestimated both the boy's courage and skill. Every time he saw the boy, a quiet sense of respect mingled with lingering guilt. One afternoon, the principal called the boy to his office. The boy walked in cautiously, unsure what was expected this time. The office smelled faintly of polished wood and old books, a quiet space that felt far removed from the chaos of the hallways. The principal gestured for him to sit, leaning back in his chair. "I wanted to speak with you," he said, his tone softer than usual. "I realize I made a mistake the day I asked you to play for the assembly. I didn't think about how it might feel, and I treated it as a joke. You handled it far better than I ever could have expected." The boy nodded quietly, listening, not needing to respond immediately. He could see the sincerity in the principal's eyes. The words were an apology, yes, but also a recognition of what the boy had accomplished. The principal continued, "I want to help you grow your talent. I know that's not why you play music, but I want to make sure you have opportunities to explore it fully, if you choose to. Whether it's competitions, concerts, or anything else, I want to support you." For the boy, this was unexpected. He had never sought approval or recognition from adults, especially those who had once underestimated him. Yet hearing the principal speak honestly, without jokes or hidden motives, stirred something in him. It was not about praise. It was about possibility. The chance to explore music beyond his private practice, to share it with a wider audience, felt both exciting and daunting. He agreed, simply saying, "I'll think about it." Word of the boy's growing recognition spread throughout the school. Some students became protective of him, ready to defend him from teasing or dismissive comments. Others were inspired, realizing that being quiet or different did not mean being powerless. The boy's experience had become a lesson, not only for himself but for everyone around him. It was proof that courage and talent could be discovered in the least expected ways. Over the next few weeks, the boy began to participate more openly in school activities. He volunteered for small performances during lunch breaks, played for music classes, and even helped younger students learn simple songs. He did not seek the spotlight, but his presence was noticed wherever he went. The quiet confidence he carried made others take him seriously, not as a novelty, but as someone whose dedication and skill deserved respect. The principal continued to reflect on his own actions and the lessons of the boy's performances. He realized that moments intended as jokes or minor entertainment could have lasting consequences, both positive and negative. He thought about how easily assumptions could mislead people, and how important it was to see students for their true potential, rather than judging them based on appearances or behavior. The boy's talent had opened his eyes, and he felt a quiet determination to handle his role differently from now on. One day, a student approached the boy, nervous but eager. I wanted to say thank you," the student said. "Because of you, I realized I could do something I never thought I could." The boy smiled faintly, the kind of smile that carried warmth without pride. "That's good," he said simply. "It's not about being the best. It's about trying and doing what you love." The student nodded, inspired not just by the music, but by the way the boy lived quietly yet courageously. As time passed, the boy's music began to change the culture of the school in subtle ways. Students became more supportive of each other's talents, teachers encouraged quiet students to step forward, and even the principal made a point to observe potential in every child, rather than making assumptions. The prank that had started it all became a story told often, not with laughter at the boy's expense, but with admiration for the way he had turned a challenging moment into a triumph. At home, the boy continued to practice with dedication. He explored more complex pieces, experimenting with different styles and emotions. Music had always been a refuge, a place of expression, and now it had become a bridge to the world outside. He felt proud of what he had achieved, but he never let it overshadow the simple joy that music gave him. Every note, every chord, every melody was a reflection of his heart, and he played not for recognition, but for the feeling it brought him. One afternoon, the principal invited him to perform for a regional music showcase. The boy felt a mix of excitement and nerves. This was far beyond anything he had imagined when the prank had occurred months earlier. It was a chance to share his talent with a wider audience, to be recognized not just by the school, but by the community and possibly beyond. He prepared diligently, practicing every day, refining each piece until he felt ready. The day of the showcase arrived, and the boy walked into a large auditorium filled with people. His heart raced, but he focused on the music, letting it guide him. As his fingers touched the keys, he felt the familiar comfort of the piano beneath his hands. He began to play, and immediately, the hall became quiet, every listener drawn into the music. The performance was not just skillful. It was alive with emotion, telling a story without words, reaching everyone in the audience. When the final note lingered, the audience erupted into applause. Teachers, students, and strangers alike cheered, some even standing in ovation. The boy bowed, quietly, acknowledging the appreciation without seeking attention. In that moment, he understood that what had started as a prank, a moment meant to embarrass him, had transformed into a journey of growth, courage, and recognition. The principal, sitting in the audience, felt a mixture of pride and humility. He remembered the day he had asked the boy to play as a joke, expecting laughter, and now realized how far the boy had come. He had witnessed not just talent, but resilience, determination, and the power of turning challenges into opportunities. It was a lesson he would carry with him forever, one that reminded him of the importance of seeing potential rather than making assumptions. After the showcase, the boy returned to school, welcomed by his classmates with admiration and respect. The experience had changed him not in arrogance but in confidence. He had faced a challenge, embraced his talent, and shared it with others, leaving an impression that would last long after the notes faded from the piano. Students who had once ignored him now looked to him as an example, inspired not just by his skill, but by his courage and humility. Teachers continued to support him, offering guidance, opportunities, and encouragement. The principal made a point to observe other students with care, remembering the lessons the boy had taught him about talent, courage, and the unexpected ways in which greatness could appear. The boy's journey had become a story of transformation, not just for himself, but for the entire school community. Through it all, the boy remained humble. He continued to practice, to play for himself and others, and to share his gift quietly yet powerfully. Music had given him a voice, confidence, and a sense of belonging, and he understood that it was not just about performance. It was about expressing who he was, reaching others, and inspiring them to explore their own potential. The prank that had started it all was now a distant memory, replaced by admiration, respect, and recognition. The boy had turned an embarrassing moment into a defining one, a moment that revealed his strength, skill, and character. And as the school continued its daily routines, students and teachers alike carried with them the lesson that talent, courage, and humility could transform not just a single moment, but an entire community. By the time the school year was drawing to a close, the boy had become a quiet symbol of courage and talent. Students and teachers alike had grown used to seeing him in the hallways, practicing quietly, sharing a small smile here and there, but everyone knew that beneath his calm exterior was a talent that had changed the way the school thought about its students. What had started as a prank, meant to embarrass him, had transformed into a journey that touched the lives of everyone around him. The boy's reputation for skill and humility spread beyond the school walls. Parents spoke of him at community events, neighbors mentioned his dedication to music, and local musicians began to take notice. Invitations came for him to play at small recitals, community gatherings, and charity events. Each invitation made him nervous at first, but he accepted them carefully, understanding that this was an opportunity to share something he loved, not a way to seek attention or approval. Every performance became a chance to connect with people, to show them that passion and dedication could speak louder than words. At school, the boy noticed changes too. Students who had once ignored him or dismissed him were now eager to engage, ask questions, or simply listen. Some of the younger students began to see him as a role model, someone who demonstrated that talent could exist quietly, waiting for the right moment to shine. Even those who had teased him before treated him differently now, not because he demanded respect, but because he had earned it through courage, skill, and consistent humility. The principal continued to reflect on the boy's journey. He often remembered the day he had tried to make a joke of the boy's talent, expecting laughter, and realized how profoundly wrong he had been. That mistake had become a learning moment for him, and he was determined to never underestimate a student again. He encouraged other students to explore their own abilities, asking teachers to notice hidden potential and support it. The school environment, though still typical in many ways, had begun to feel more inclusive, more attentive to quiet strengths that might otherwise go unnoticed. One morning, the principal called the boy to his office again. The boy entered, careful and respectful, and the principal gestured for him to sit. "I wanted to tell you something," he began. "I've been thinking about the past year, about what happened in the assembly, and about what you've shown all of us. You've done something remarkable, not just with music, but with the way you carry yourself, the way you inspire others without even trying. The school is better because of you." The boy listened quietly, feeling a warmth that had little to do with recognition and everything to do with understanding. He had never sought fame or praise. Music had always been his private world. But the acknowledgement, coming from someone who had once tried to make a joke of him, felt different. It was sincere, honest, and carried a weight that made him reflect on how far he had come. The principal continued, "I want to make sure your talent is nurtured beyond this school. We'll help you apply to music programs, workshops, anything that can give you the opportunities you deserve. You have a gift, and it's our responsibility to support it." The boy nodded, feeling a mix of excitement and quiet determination. The chance to grow further, to explore music in new ways, was thrilling, but he also understood that it would require discipline and focus. He was ready. Outside of school, the boy's life remained grounded. He practiced at home, continuing the routines that had brought him skill and confidence. He experimented with new pieces, tried different styles, and allowed himself to be expressive in ways he had never imagined. Music had become a bridge between his inner world and the world around him. It was a way to connect with others, to communicate feelings that words could never capture, and to inspire those who might not yet know their own potential. Community events became part of his routine. Each time he performed, whether for a handful of people or a larger crowd, he focused not on applause but on the music itself. Audiences often left in awe, moved by the emotion in his playing and the precision of his technique. Teachers, students, and parents spoke of him as someone extraordinary, but the boy remained modest, reminding himself always that talent was a tool for expression, not ego. Back at school, the ripple effects of his journey were visible everywhere. Students who had been shy or hesitant began exploring their own interests more openly. Teachers were more attentive, asking questions, encouraging hidden talents to emerge. The principal implemented small programs to ensure that every student had a chance to be seen for more than just grades or behavior. The boy had become an unexpected catalyst for positive change, proving that one individual's courage and skill could influence an entire community. One day, a younger student approached him, trembling slightly with nerves. I wanted to ask, can you help me learn to play like you? The boy smiled gently. It's not about playing exactly like me, he said softly. It's about finding your own way, practicing, and enjoying the music you love. I can help you get started, and then it's your own journey. The student's eyes lit up, inspired not only by his talent, but by the kindness and humility he had shown. The boy began mentoring a few students who shared his love of music. He encouraged them patiently, listened to their struggles, and celebrated their progress. Each small success became a moment of shared joy. He discovered that teaching was another way to connect with others, another way to give back. Through these interactions, he realized that talent alone was not enough. Sharing it, inspiring others, and helping them discover their potential was equally important. As the school year ended, the principal organized a special assembly to honor the boy. It was not a celebration of a prank or a moment of surprise, but a recognition of consistent effort, courage, and the positive influence he had on the school. Students applauded, teachers smiled, and even parents attended to witness the impact of one quiet student who had become a symbol of possibility. The boy accepted the acknowledgement with humility, nodding quietly and letting the applause wash over him without seeking more than the moment deserved. During the assembly, the principal addressed the students. This student has taught us all a valuable lesson. Talent, courage, and humility can come from unexpected places. We should always look for the best in each other, encourage each other, and never underestimate what someone can do. His journey has inspired the entire school, and we are grateful for the example he has set. The boy's eyes focused on the piano at the front of the hall. He had not been asked to play this time, but he felt the familiar pull of the keys, the comfort of music flowing through him. He realized that the journey he had begun months earlier, when a prank had forced him to step into the spotlight, had grown into something much larger. It had taught him courage, the value of dedication, the importance of humility, and the power of sharing one's gifts with others. After the assembly, students crowded around him, asking questions, offering congratulations, and expressing admiration. Some wanted to know what piece he would play next, others asked for tips on learning music, and a few simply thanked him for inspiring them. He listened, responding with gentle words, always encouraging them to find their own voice, their own passion. He had learned that true influence did not come from being praised or recognized, but from helping others believe in themselves. In the months that followed, the boy continued to grow as a musician and as a person. He performed at community events, mentored students, and continued his private practice. His talent had opened doors, yes, but more importantly, it had shown him that courage, humility, and persistence mattered as much as skill. He understood now that life could challenge a person in unexpected ways, and that those challenges could be opportunities to discover strength, resilience, and purpose. The principal watched with quiet pride as the boy navigated these opportunities. He had learned to listen more, judge less, and notice potential where he might once have overlooked it. Teachers followed suit, creating an environment where students felt safe to explore their abilities, to take risks, and to express themselves. The boy's story had created a culture shift, one that emphasized growth, respect, and the recognition of hidden talents. At home, the boy reflected on the journey that had begun with a prank. He remembered the nervous steps toward the piano, the initial hesitation, and the first notes that had startled the audience. He realized how far he had come, not just in skill, but in confidence, empathy, and understanding. Music had been his guide, his refuge, and ultimately his bridge to the world. He had discovered that what seemed like a moment of embarrassment could become a turning point, shaping not only his own life, but also the lives of those around him. He thought about the students who now looked up to him, the younger students he mentored, and the community members who had witnessed his performances. He understood that talent was meaningful not just for personal achievement, but for the way it could inspire, encourage, and connect people. The prank had been an unexpected beginning, but it had led to a journey of purpose, courage, and lasting impact. As the school year came to an end, the boy played one last piece in the empty hall, alone with the piano. He let his fingers move freely, exploring melodies that expressed everything he had learned. Fear, courage, humility, joy, and hope. The music echoed through the empty hallways, carrying a quiet strength that had grown within him over the months. He smiled softly, knowing that the journey was far from over, but that he had taken the first steps with honesty, grace, and determination. The hallways of the school continued to bustle with students, laughter, and chatter, but something had changed. There was a sense of possibility, a belief that talent, courage, and kindness could shape the environment in ways that mattered. The boy had become more than a student who had once been the target of a prank. He had become a symbol of resilience, a source of inspiration, and a reminder that greatness can come quietly, patiently, and unexpectedly. And so, the boy continued on his journey, playing music not for recognition, not for praise, but for the joy it brought him and the way it could touch others. The prank that had begun as a moment of embarrassment had turned into a story of courage, transformation, and lasting impact. A story that would be remembered long after the notes faded from the piano.